What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. Today we are checking another interesting video. It's this one right here. So, more differences between Australia and the United States. Unconventional. So let's actually see the differences we actually got here, Australia and the United States. It's going to be a pretty great video, I can tell. So guys, stay tuned till the end. Don't forget, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and yeah, let's like this one and let's see what we have.
Welcome back to a part 2 of the differences between Australia and the US. I'm specifically going to be comparing Melbourne, Australia to the Bay Area in California, as I just moved from California over to Australia about 2 months ago, so I've noticed a bunch of differences and I wanted to share with you guys what those differences are. If you're interested in seeing more differences, definitely hop over to part 1 as I jump into some different differences that I didn't
We probably should have checked out part 1 first, but I think it's alright. Let's see part 2.
mention in this video. Of course it's Australia because all the birds are going crazy outside. Alright, now
Yeah,
let's
the
jump
birds.
into those differences. One big difference that I noticed pretty recently
Okay, so
was
while watching this, I'm going to be eating my chocolate as well. So forgive me,
I
guys.
went into the city. I have a video about it, and in that video I think
Some
I
dark
really
chocolate.
noticed when we're in the city that when I would look up I could see all the stars even though we were in the city. Australia just has so much
Okay.
less light pollution than the US because, well, in terms of like the entire country, there's like, I don't know, I think about like 5 big cities, but in the US there's hundreds and hundreds of big
Okay, that
cities.
is
So because of
kinda
that,
like
the light pollution
common
is really
sense, I would
spread
say.
out. Like if you look at a map of light pollution from the US, it's super heavy on the
Wow.
East Coast, and then there's kind of a gap.
Is
And
that like the lighting in US? That's crazy, man. Like the right side over here is literally so populated.
and on the West Coast as well. There's like a big group
Especially
of
by
light
the
pollution,
coast,
where in
yeah.
Australia I feel like the light pollution is just focused in these little pockets, but even though it's focused in those
What?
pockets,
Is
there
that
really
really how
wasn't that
Australia
much
is?
light pollution.
That's
I don't know
crazy.
whether it's like the design of the lights or just how many people live in Australia compared to the US, but it was so crazy looking up in the middle of the city surrounded by all these giant tall buildings and seeing stars, which is what I'm not used to being in
So
the Bay
for
Area.
sure,
Now some more
US
differences
has
about the
more
whole car
population.
situation.
Right.
I think most people know that in Australia you drive on the left side of the road compared to in America you drive on the right. And because of that, the driver's side seat is also on the opposite side. Another thing when driving
Okay.
too that I didn't even realize was illegal in Australia is driving barefoot. Because
What?
in America, I feel like whenever
That's
I wear
illegal,
like
driving
flip-flops,
barefoot,
or
seriously.
Australians call them thongs. But whenever I'm wearing like some kind of sandal and maybe like, or I'm going to the beach or I'm going to the pool, I just won't wear shoes when I drive.
I did
I
not
remember
know
my
that.
dad saying something about it because he grew up in Australia and he was saying like,
Oh, you're not allowed to drive barefoot, like that's illegal.
turns out it's only illegal in Australia. So in
Wow,
Australia
in
as
Australia,
well,
that's illegal,
cars
okay.
always have right of way unless you're in a pedestrian crosswalk. When it comes to crosswalks as well, you have to stand there and wait to make sure that the car is going to stop, and then when you walk across, you have to say thank you. It is huge in Australia that you have to like throw up a hand
I
or a
always
wave
say
and just
thank
be
you
like,
anyway
oh,
if
thank you
someone,
for
like,
stopping
lets
for
me
me, even
cross.
though you're supposed to.
Like
Otherwise, you're a dick.
if I'm at like at a U-turn or somewhere like at traffic lights and they let me go or whatever, I always say thank you.
In
Just
California,
being nice.
I think you can just kind of walk whatever. Nobody really cares about a pedestrian because also just
And the thing is, when people don't say thank you to me, that really gets on my nerves, bro. Like when I let a car pass and they do not say thank you, that's the worst.
pedestrians have right of way in a lot of
Let
situations.
me know in the
but
comments
like
if
in
you
parking
can
lots
compare,
and
guys.
anytime you need to cross, most of the time a car is going to stop for you in California. I mean, maybe not everywhere, but most of the time they're going to try and stop for you and the pedestrians have the right of way. In Australia, like when you're walking in a parking lot, you really have to be paying attention to where the cars are because the
Right.
cars aren't going to stop. Like they're not thinking about, oh, I have to watch out for the pedestrians. If they're walking across, I have to stop for them.
Oh, God.
They're just driving. In California, pedestrians have right of way, right? So if you're walking in a parking lot, you can walk right out behind a car and they have to stop for you. For anybody from America visiting Australia, definitely understand that cars have right of way over pedestrians. Don't get hit. Something that I also think is really cool about Australian crosswalks is that when you're going to go like click that button before you cross the street, like where there's lights and stuff, in Australia they have like little beeping sounds. Some places in California have them, but it's not really standard across all the
Okay.
crosswalk. But when you press that button, there's like a slow beep on your side and a beep on the other side of the road where you're crossing to. So it's like, so because
Okay,
of that,
that-
you're able to judge the
that's actually
distance and
really
how far it
helpful.
is. And it's really for blind people who
Okay.
are unable to see the distance, but
I
they
see.
can hear the sounds of it and know how far away it is. Also, because they can't see like the little green walking man, because then when it turns green, it starts going really fast. It goes letting
That's
you know
actually really
to
good.
go and walk
I
across
actually
the road.
thought
So
about,
in
like,
California, they
blind
do
people.
have
That's
that,
amazing.
but the sound in Australia is so unique that I think it was like in Billie Eilish's song, where I think one of her family members was like traveling in Australia, recorded
Oh, yeah, I
like the
reacted to
beeping
a video
sound,
on
and then
that.
sent it to her as a sample, and they used it in
Yeah.
one of her songs. So I thought that was pretty cool.
That is
Another
pretty
last
cool,
thing
bro.
about when it comes to cars too is that in California, every time you would see a stop sign, in Australia, you would have a roundabout instead. With stop signs, it's whoever gets to the stop sign first will then go across the intersection. I know there's roundabouts in both countries, but there's just so many more roundabouts in Australia, and I feel like the flow of them is a lot better. You don't necessarily have to wait and be the first one there. It's just if it's clear ahead, you would go. So because of that, I think there is more movement throughout the
Okay.
intersection. And because in California, like real estate is very expensive, I can understand why they just want like the best thing to work in the least amount of real estate and the least amount of land. The one downside about roundabouts though is that I feel like you really have to be paying attention when you're going through a roundabout. I feel like the stop sign is a little bit more like dummy proof for that. It just kind of takes away the flow from driving though, because with roundabouts, most of the time, if it's not a busy day, you don't have to be worrying
I
about
actually
like stopping.
hate
You're slowing down
roundabouts,
and you're
man.
yielding, but you don't have to come to a complete stop before going
Especially
forward.
the
I
busy
think it's a little bit
roundabouts. I
more
absolutely
efficient for
hate driving
roundabouts.
on
I
them.
think sometimes roundabouts can really work, but then sometimes in the city there will be roundabouts that have lights as well, which I think confuses me so much when I'm driving,
Yeah.
because for some of them you would stop in the roundabout and there's lights in the
Yeah, that
roundabout,
is a
and
bit weird
it just
to
drives
me
me
as well.
crazy when I'm driving in the cities. Okay, so we've talked enough about cars. Let's go into some other differences between the two countries.
What
One
else we
thing
got?
I found was really funny in Australia is that when you get packages, if you're not there to actually pick up the package, and this
Yeah.
could be like shoes or
kangaroos
like
steal
camera
it?
batteries or anything else that I've shipped, most of the time you have to be at the door and you have to be home in order to take the package
Okay.
in. Otherwise they leave a note on your door and you have to go to the post office to pick it up.
Oh,
Occasionally
that's
that happens in
sad.
America because maybe you have like a very important package. You have to signify that you're there to take the package. The downside of that too is anytime you need to go to the post office, there's normally like a giant line going out of the post
Oh,
office.
God, so
Another
you
little
better be
small
home when
difference
that
that I
post
noticed as well
arrives.
about Australia is that when you're hanging up something like say a poster or a piece of paper somewhere, you use this thing called blue tack instead
Blue
of
tack,
tape.
yeah.
Like let's say we're hanging up a poster. In California, I would take a piece of tape, roll it into kind of like a circle, and then stick that on the wall and stick the poster on it. But in Australia, you have like this, you would buy this ball of like blue tack, which
Yeah,
is kind of like
I
this
think
like
we know what
blue
blue tack
sticky
is.
putty. Grab a little piece of it and you would stick that on the wall and then put the
Blue
poster
tack
on
is
top
actually
of it. I don't
pretty
really have a
amazing
preference
invention,
to
bro.
either blue tack or tape, but I just thought it was interesting.
Whoever
that
figured that
in
thing
America,
out
most
is
of the
a
time we're
genius.
not using blue tack, we just use tape. And in
Okay.
Australia, you use blue tack. I don't know. Little cultural differences that I picked up on. Now we're going to talk a little bit about restaurants. Most people know that in
For me, I just use anything I find. If I have tape, I'll use tape. If there's blue tack, I would prefer it, but just depends what I have in stock.
Australia, there isn't really a tipping culture. But in California and in America, it's very heavy on the tipping culture. So coming to Australia, it was like a breeze because I didn't have to think about tipping. Also, all of the taxes included in the price, and I'm just not thinking about like, oh, I have to bring a little bit extra money if I'm buying a meal for $20. In California, I'd be like, okay, $20, but plus tax, plus I have to tip. It might end up being like $23 or $24
Okay.
and some odd cents. The great thing in Australia is like, if I'm going to buy something for $20, I just need to bring $20. I don't have to think about tax. I don't have to think about tip. Another key part of that too is that in California, it's like this new wave of restaurants. When you're tipping before you've even had the service. So it's a little bit frustrating
Before you
sometimes
have
in
the
California
service,
because
okay.
say you're going up and you're buying an ice cream, they flip the little iPad around and they're like, what do you want to tip? 15, 20, 25%?
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm just getting an ice cream. The tipping culture is a little bit annoying.
Yeah, I was gonna say that as well. I find it annoying as well, like when they actually give you that and they like ask you if you want to tip. Like if I want to tip, I will. I always tip, to be honest. I always tip. But bro, if I want to tip, there's no need to like shove it in my face. You know what I mean? I don't know if you guys agree, but that's just me. But usually I always tip, so
Understand
That's
why it's
alright.
there though, and it's because the workers aren't getting the pay that they should be getting, and they're relying on tips for that
Yeah.
extra money. It can
Okay,
be a
I
little
can
sad
understand
sometimes
them.
as well,
I can
knowing that
understand them,
you're
yeah.
supporting that person's job by tipping. You want to tip, you want to help them out, but at the same time, it shouldn't be up to you. It should be up to the employer, making sure that they're pricing everything right in order to pay their workers a decent wage. A little story time too. I was in Utah with my mom and we went out to like a Brazilian steakhouse, and one of the girls that was working there said that she said her wage was something maybe like $3 an hour or $4 an hour, like something insane. I know like Utah has a lower minimum wage, but like it was well below the minimum wage. And the reason being is that they included tips in their wage. So they expect them to get, you know, some odd number of money in their tips and to use that as part of their wage. What if one week the tips aren't as good, or you're just not getting paid that much because you're getting technically only like $3 or $4 an hour? So I don't know. It makes me.
Okay, I just want to add something on the tipping part. So like I've experienced, like I've been to places, restaurants or like bars, which was pretty awful, bro. Honestly, pretty awful. Like the drinks were bad, long wait on the service, like the waiters were just nowhere to be found. And like honestly, guys, then when the time comes to pay and they show you that tipping machine, bro, I'm like, bro, are you serious now? This was like so bad experience, and after all that, you want me to tip? Anyways, that's just a short story from me as well.
Makes me mad, and I don't want to spend more time talking about this, but I love that Australia doesn't have a tipping culture. I love it so much. Thank
Okay,
you,
so
Australia.
Australia does not have a tipping.
Yeah.
Okay.
Another
not bad,
difference
not bad.
too that I noticed is that when you're washing your clothes, even though people will have a perfectly fine dryer that completely works and it's not a problem, not an issue, people prefer to dry their clothes outside or like on a line, or what's the word for them? I think it's a drying rack, but when I think of a drying rack, I think of dishes. Anyways, it's a clothes drying rack. So when you're washing your clothes, you're gonna be drying them on like the drying rack rather than like throwing them in the dryer. I don't really know the reason behind it, but it is really good for the environment because you're not using a dryer and you're not using electricity. You're literally using the sun, so that's great. Free energy. All it takes is like a little bit of time to like hang up your clothes. So if you don't care about that, totally fine, just dry your clothes on the line. I don't know whether it comes from like European influence as well, because I know in Europe a lot of the time they just don't have dryers, or they prefer to dry their clothes on the line. But yeah, I think it's kind of cool because I feel a little bit like a grandma in Europe, like throwing my clothes on the line, like over the alleyway in Italy or something. And a lot of people have their like these giant drying lines like built into their house, and a lot of houses just come with it. One difference too, obviously it's like a huge difference between Australia and America, is that the accents obviously are different, but also just like the little things about the accent as well. For example, like a lot of things are just shortened in Australia, and I'm gonna do a whole video about slang. Afternoon, arvo. If someone's like a bricklayer, you call them a brickie. Like it's all these longer words are just shortened in Australia. Like California specifically, I always get outed for saying like a lot, and you've probably noticed throughout this whole video that I just I don't know. There's just
I also say the word like pretty a lot, bro. If you like noticed any other words I actually say quite a lot, let me know in the comments, bro. I'm truly interested.
Little things about the different accents and like the different things that we come from our culture, that we just do little quirky things. I'm sorry if it bugs you, but it's just how I speak. Sorry, not sorry. Also, if you're looking for other videos around moving to Australia and my experience with moving, I recently got reached out to from a website where they interviewed me and they wrote an article on my experience. So definitely head over to their website and check that out. All right, the sun is coming out for the end of this video, but I just wanted to say thank you guys so much for watching and supporting my channel.
That was actually a really cool video. I don't think I've ever reacted to her videos before. Let me just quickly check something here. So
welcome back to.
She's not too big of a YouTuber, but her videos are pretty great, I must say. I might check out more of her videos. There's like some California ones here. New Zealand, testing American with Australian slang. Okay, I mean, I'll check out some of her videos. It seemed pretty cool. Anyway, guys, so that was that for today. Hope you all enjoyed. If you actually did and made it to the end, guys, go smash that like button, subscribe to the channel. And yeah, guys, thanks for watching. Have a good day, and we'll see you on the next one. Peace out, guys.